Welcome back to my channel. It has been almost a month since I put out a call to you guys on my community tab, on Twitter, and on Instagram, asking for your assumptions about lawyers. You may have all forgotten about that, but I didn't. And today I'm going to answer those assumptions. So thank you for sending them in, and thank you for being so patient with me. I have quite a few new and new-ish makeup products that I wanted to play around with, so that's what we're going to do today. I'm just going to do a chit-chat, get ready with me, while answering your assumptions about lawyers. Now, quickly, just a few caveats. I can only speak to these assumptions based on, obviously, my own experiences. I practice family law in a relatively small town in Ontario. I think our population's about 150,000, so we're not tiny by any stretch, but we're not Toronto. Toronto has a very different culture and feel to it than my city, and I would probably be responding to these assumptions differently if I practiced there, which I don't, and I'm happy about that. Also, I practice family law, so I think that my experiences are going to be different than somebody who does corporate law versus criminal law versus civil litigation. So I'm only going to be able to speak to it, obviously, from my experiences, so just take my responses with a grain of salt. This is just based on what I have seen. All right, so let us dive straight into it. I will say I'm going to list the items that I'm using down below. I'm not going to be giving any sort of feedback on the items as we go along because some of them are brand new to me, such as this one right here. This is the silicone-free priming moisturizer from Good Molecules. Good Molecules was generous enough to send me over a little package that I received yesterday with about 4 or 5 different items in it to try out. So I'm going to be putting this one to the test for the first time today. All right, so with that, I have written out all of the assumptions that you guys had. There are 18 of them, so let's go. Okay, so we're just gonna start straight out of the gate with male lawyers are assholes. That was an assumption obviously sent in, not a statement that I am making. And I am happy to say that my experience has been that this is not the case. There are certainly some male lawyers that I really enjoy working with. I appreciate their approach to matters. I like talking to them on the phone and I trust them. And I feel like they're just very much solution oriented and they're not getting sucked into this idea that they have to puff up their chest and, you know, be the big bad guy in the room or anything of that nature. So while there certainly are some that do tend to beat their chest and make a bunch of noise and they're really just, you want to flick them in the forehead because it's just so unnecessary and so annoying, they are few and far between. And by and large, the majority of the male lawyers that I have worked with have been excellent. It's like any other area of life. You get really great people and you get other people that their personality just does not mesh with yours. And for what it's worth, when people put on that kind of display, for me, it doesn't impress me and it doesn't really intimidate me either because it's not about how loud you can bark, it's what the substance is behind what you're saying. And I just find that a lot of times the people who feel that they need to resort to theatrics and resort to this kind of like, I don't know, hyper-aggressive behavior, it's because they don't have the confidence in what it is that they're saying. And it's just kind of like a distraction. All right, so the next assumption then is that all lawyers are ruthless. And I blame TV for giving us this reputation because certainly it makes for a lot more compelling TV watching if people are ruthless and always out for blood. And that's not been my experience, to be honest. Certainly there are people who do lose sight of the bigger picture and just focus on the win, but particularly in family law, there really is no winning per se. It's all a matter of degrees, and it's not as like black and white as, say, contract law about like bales of hay or something. Like it's families, it's balancing different things, it's determining best interests of the children, it's looking at the circumstances that have developed throughout these people's relationship, depending on how many years it is and all of that kind of thing. So it is a very nuanced area. And so to go into it, sorry, I'm so classy. How you know I'm not a professional makeup artist. But to go into it with a super aggressive and ruthless sort of demeanor is not going to get you very far. And frankly, if the Law Society, at least our Law Society here in Ontario, if they were to find out that you were acting in that kind of way, they're going to have a thing or two to say about that. We are a self-governing body, and we are required, like we have professional rules that require civility. And in my manner of thinking, when I think ruthless, I think win at all costs. And that's just not the way that it is meant to be. Certainly there are some lawyers who do get swept up into that kind of thinking, but for the most part, not so much. We do advocate for our clients, and we do argue on their behalf, and we take their positions and we argue them as best we can. Sometimes you can't win. It depends on what the circumstances of the situation are, but you do present it in the best light possible, and you try to help parties reach a compromise so that it's not an all or nothing. But to be completely ruthless about it or to be underhanded in any way, there's very little of that, to be honest, at least in the area that I practice in. Again, just like before, you get, you know, the odd bad apple every now and then, but it's at least where I practice, if somebody develops a reputation for behaving in that way, everybody knows, and everybody is on like red alert around that kind of thing, and it doesn't sit well with the local bar, and it certainly doesn't sit well with the judges in the area either. So I wouldn't go so far as to say that we are a ruthless bunch. God, you guys think really highly of lawyers. The next assumption is all lawyers are liars. Again, not so much, because at the end of the day, like, yes, we have to advocate for our clients, and yes, we are trying to get the best result for our clients as we possibly can. We are representing them, but at any given point, you're representing one client out of your entire career. And to stake your professional reputation or even your professional credentials, like your ability and your license to practice law, to put all of that at risk by lying to the court, that is not a risk that I would take. That's for absolute sure. That's not something that I'm willing to do. I'm never going to risk my own professional reputation for the sake of a client. So no, I wouldn't say that we are all liars. I think we do try to put the most positive filter on things as possible, but at the end of the day, the evidence is what it is, and you can't really lie about stuff like that. Again, because it's a huge risk. So setting aside the whole morals of it, it's just a huge professional risk to lie on behalf of your client, and it's not something that most people are willing to do. They don't want to risk their entire career for the sake of one client out of 40 years that you could be practicing. All right, the next one is females can't wear color in their clothing. And I'm happy to report that that is not the case. So there are different kinds of court dates. So when I'm there for just a conference, like a settlement conference where it is a bit more informal, I can wear essentially whatever I want. Business wear, but essentially whatever I want. If I want to wear a bright pink blazer, I can wear a bright pink blazer. If I want to wear a patterned dress, I can do that. It's when we go to trial or when we have something called a motion, which is in essence like a little tiny mini trial where it's just the lawyers presenting a case and doing actual argument, and it's a judge making a decision on one point out of the big picture, or a couple of points, doesn't matter. That's where we have to wear our robes. And I've shown pictures of it before, but it's basically a black jacket, a black cape, for lack of a better word, and then like a white colored shirt with these long tabs that hang down. And all the lawyers are wearing that. And I honestly don't really know what the nexus of all that kind of pomp and circumstance is, but it's what we're required to wear, so that's what we wear. So that's the only time where our wardrobe is sort of dictated to us. And in that regard, we do need to wear like black pants or gray pants, black shoes, a black dress, something of that nature, but it's very much black or gray, which is really kind of ironic, to be honest, that the vast majority of what we wear is black and white when we go to motions in trial. Anyways, moving on. The next, I don't even know that it's an assumption, it's more like a statement, but the retainer is almost impossible if you work a regular 9 to 5. And again, that's going to depend on where you go and what you're retaining for, but it does raise the unstated statement here that access to justice is problematic. And I would completely agree with that. So retainers, they're going to run you a different amount for different things, like I said. So if you're hiring me to just do a divorce with no negotiation of anything else, but just get a divorce application or a divorce order, that is going to be a flat rate fee with tax included. I don't charge my hourly rate for that. We just do a block fee and it's done. If you're retaining me to negotiate an agreement of some sort, whether that's a cohabitation agreement, a marriage contract or prenup, or a separation agreement, that's going to be a lower retainer than if you're retaining me to go to court, simply because court dates, there's so much more work involved in them, and so we go through the retainer more quickly. So that's why we require it to be larger. Different firms are going to charge different amounts, but if you make more than what legal aid will, okay. So legal aid is available for people, but they do have financial criteria that need to be met. And the amount of income that you are allowed to earn in order to qualify for legal aid is alarmingly low. So there is a little bit of a spillover where they will still qualify you, but they'll require you to contribute towards your own legal expenses, particularly in the case where people do own property. They will put a lien on the house so that they can guarantee payment towards a portion of their bills. If you're making, say, $35,000 to $65,000 a year, affording a lawyer is going to be incredibly difficult because it's not just the retainer. The retainer is just a one-time upfront fee, and every office works in a different way. But with ours, we do our bills at the end of each month, and then whatever's being used in that month, we require a top-up so that we're always maintaining that initial amount in there, and then when the matter is said and done, we just return what hasn't been used. But then in that way, we can guarantee that we get paid. Because if you're selling cars, if somebody doesn't pay for the car, you can take the car back and you can mitigate your losses by then selling it to somebody else. I can't do that in my job. I can't take back the time that I've already spent. I can't undivorce people. So there's no leverage for me. So for lawyers, we do need to maintain funds in trust so that we can guarantee that we get paid. So where am I going with this? The retainer, yes. So while the initial retainer, I mean, a lot of clients borrow that from parents or siblings or take it out of RSPs or whatever. 401ks in the States, I think that's roughly the equivalent, I don't know. While they can borrow that, it's the ongoing costs that become very expensive. So it's a huge area of concern, and it's why we see so many self-represented people, especially at court, because they can't afford that ongoing expense. And even when you are making $100,000 a year, to pay thousands of dollars into legal fees, like very few people have a ton of just expendable income that they can pay on this kind of stuff. And that's why you don't want to retain the lawyer who is ruthless and lying and all of that kind of thing, because all of that comes at a cost. And the cost isn't necessarily to the lawyer, the cost is to the client, because they are paying to fund these kind of shenanigans, which tend to just distract from reaching a resolution. So the next assumption then is that lawyers are all confrontational. And I don't really feel like I need to spend a ton of time on that given my other responses, but I would say not necessarily. I think we all do tend to enjoy a good debate. I think that's kind of one of the appeals to our career. But I wouldn't say that we're all just looking to fight, especially not in my practice area at any rate. It's not to say that we're not above doing it, that's for sure, but I don't think most of us like go to court just with the idea of like it's going to be an all-out brawl. A lot of us, especially when we're at court and we're like meeting each other, like the lawyers are seeing each other, we really are just trying to figure out what we're going to do for our clients. Like the number of times that both myself and other lawyers have said, like, what are we going to do for these people? That is typically what the approach is. It's very rare to show up at court and somebody's like, you're going down. Like that's just not a thing. Which kind of ties into the next assumption, which is that lawyers are not all like the ones on TV. And that is true. We most definitely are not. Now I do enjoy a good legal procedural, but they're not accurate to real life. They're truly not. And I think that they tend to give people a very misleading idea as to how long, especially court matters tend to take. Because people start freaking out when they figure out what the real timelines are. But let's put it this way. You're not going to walk into my office in the morning and I'm going to go to trial with you in the afternoon. That's not a thing. That is never going to happen. So the timelines that they show and certainly the theatrics and antics that people get into, that's not a thing. They never show, and I totally understand why they don't show this stuff in TV, but they don't show the number of hours of just drafting, like just writing documents, reviewing rule books, doing case law research. They don't show the mundane side of it. They don't show people signing separation agreements, which are, 30 some odd pages long, and you have to initial every page and sign in multiple spots. Like, I get why they don't show that. That would be horrifically boring television. So of course they're gonna show what makes, it's like if you watched an actual like crime procedural where people are just like making calls and not getting anywhere, nobody's gonna click into that every week. So that's why these legal shows are the way they are. But no, we're not all like the guys that you see on Suits, and we're not all like insanely brilliant minds that know every little tiny particular nuanced area of law that ever existed. Like, so no, we're definitely not like what you see on TV. Okay, up. Sorry, this one just makes me laugh. The next assumption is that you sometimes secretly hate your clients. Hate's a strong word, but like clients are people. And you don't like all people. And that holds true even as a lawyer. That doesn't mean that I'm going to do a bad job for them. That doesn't mean that I'm going to intentionally sink their case for them. But it can add a layer of stress that otherwise wouldn't be there. Luckily, the vast majority of my clients are absolutely lovely. And a lot of them end up becoming friends. My best friend who I had on here probably a month and a half ago for a live, Erin, she started off as a client. We are absolute best friends. We're basically like sisters at this point. So it's just people, right? And you're dealing with people at potentially the worst time in their life. So they're not always on their best behavior. I get a lot of people do like apologize for crying or apologize for swearing or for being upset. And I'm like, dude, I get it. Like this is not easy stuff. And then also add into the fact that like the financial aspects of it, the unknown part of it, and then layer all that on top of just the utter heartbreak that they're going through. And now they're not living in the same house as their kids, or maybe they are, and that's overwhelming in and of itself. And the other parent isn't doing what they're supposed to. Like there's a whole host of things going on. And then you have me coming in and saying, here's what is going to happen and here's what needs to be done, and you may not want to hear that. It may not be stuff that you want to do. You don't want to share your pension. I get that. Can I change the law? Not so much. You're going to do it. But you're not going to enjoy doing that. So yeah, there are some clients that I don't like, and some clients don't like me, and that's okay too, because that's not my job. My job is not to be your friend. My job is to give you advice and guide you through the process and just sort of walk you through what's going on and advocate for you. So that's that. So moving along then, there are two assumptions that I'm going to roll into one because they're basically the same. So one person responded that lawyers are rolling in the millions, and then somebody else said lawyers are crazy rich living the high life. And again, that's what is usually displayed on TV, and I'm not going to deny that lawyers can make very good money, but again, it's going to depend on what area you're practicing in, what size firm you have, what size city you live in, that kind of thing. So the rates that people can charge in Toronto are not going to be sustainable in a city my size. And what people can charge at, you know, a multinational firm is not what somebody like me who owns my own firm with one partner and one associate can charge. And also people who are charging corporate clients are going to be able to charge differently than what people who are charging families can charge. So it's kind of a difficult comparison to make, and it's certainly not, you can't really generalize, because there are lawyers in Toronto who are probably charging $750 to $1,000 an hour. If I tried to do that where I practice, I would never have a client. It would not be realistic or a reasonable thing to charge. So I for one am not rolling in the millions, we'll put it that way. So kind of tying in with what I've just said, the next assumption is that it's all about the fee and lawyers don't really care about the case. And again, I'm sure that there are situations like that, and in fact, I am aware of some lawyers like that. I will never name names in one of these videos, but again, reputations do get around, especially when you practice in a relatively small area like I do. But I'm happy to report that the lawyers like that in my area, again, are few and far between. Most of us, especially in family law, the money's not enough to deal with what we deal with. It is very, very high stress, and it is very emotional, and you have to have more than just wanting to make a paycheck in order to do this particular area of law. And as well, if it was just about the money, family law, probably not your best bet. Yeah, there's money to be made in it, but if you really want big dollars, you're going to do personal injury, or you're going to do like corporate stuff downtown Toronto, not family law in Barrie, Ontario. Clients take a huge emotional toll on you, and some of them certainly do. There are certain cases that just stick with you. Again, when I talk in a future video about sort of highs and lows and matters that have stuck with me over the years, there is one in particular that one still haunts me and still lives with me. But it's very difficult to establish a complete boundary. I've been doing this for 11 years, so I've learned coping strategies over that period, in terms of just kind of keeping things separate between work and home. There are times where I just kind of have to remind myself, there are times where I do have to remind myself that I can't save these children, because it's usually the children that I'm more concerned about than my clients, and I very rarely get to meet the children, but those are the innocents in these situations, and those are the people that have no control over the situation. If they have two terrible parents, I can't fix that for them, and that can be really difficult to handle. So I do have to just remind myself that I can't fix that and that they're not my children. And I think I've talked about this in a previous video as well. Like, all I can do is just care for my kids and give my kids the best life that I possibly can, because I can't rescue those kids. And I don't do child protection matters specifically for this reason, because it's just way too hard on my heart. Like, it's way too hard for me. So I don't deal with that, but you still see bad behavior even when it's not in that kind of context. So it can be very emotionally draining, and even just dealing with people arguing all the time can be exhausting. So yeah, there is certainly an emotional toll. It's a difficult career. I do feel like you can't do this just for a paycheck. Not with the amount of emotional baggage that comes along with it. But let's just take a really quick side note, because I want to give a huge thank you to the subscriber who sent me this incredibly beautiful palette. This is from Chantecaille. It is the cool version of the Hummingbird Eye Quartet, and it's so stunning. It's so beautiful. This is obviously what I'm going to be using on my eyes today. This is my first time using it. It's so incredibly beautiful, and I cannot get over the generosity of this person to send this to me. I don't expect anything from you guys. I really, really don't. But when you do donate to my PayPal or send me items, please, please know that it is so appreciated. I don't take any of this for granted at all. Like, I don't even have words. I've thanked her so many times, like, personally. I don't want to say her name simply because I don't know. I just always worry that people are going to, like, demand stuff from other people. I don't want to do that. So thank you. You know who you are. Thank you. Like a million times thank you. It's incredible. It's so incredible. All right, so let's get back into it. The next assumption is that lawyers are snobby. No, we're not. We're just people doing a job. I think there are some people who do take the career a little bit more seriously than's probably healthy or appropriate. But for the most part, we're a fun bunch. At least the lawyers that I practice with. I had a bunch of them over at my house on the weekend, and we were just doing a games night and just, you know, a couple of drinks and chit-chatting and tons of laughter. And I'm just so grateful for the friend base that I have in this practice, because again, they get it. They have good clients, they have bad clients too. And like, it's just the camaraderie is so good. So I think the vast majority of lawyers, like, we don't take it on as our own persona. Some people do. I could tell stories. I'm not going to, but I could. Some people just view themselves as a lawyer, full stop. Whereas, at least the lawyers that I hang around with, we view ourselves as people whose job is to be a lawyer. There's a bit of a difference there. So no, we're not snobby, we're just people doing a job. All right, the next assumption is that lawyers need to be aggressive bulldogs. And I think I've already answered that one as well, but no, we don't. And honestly, being super aggressive doesn't really get you any further ahead. You just look like an idiot in court, frankly. And judges really don't have a lot of patience for that kind of thing, and it doesn't change the circumstances. So while you can advocate strongly and while you can be a strong representative for your client, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be hyper aggressive. And in fact, when people ask me if I'm a bulldog, or saying that they want to hire a bulldog, or slightly ruder descriptions, I actually just tell them that I'm not the person for them, because I'm not going to put on theatrics, because it doesn't change anything. Okay, next is that lawyers love to argue in real life. You might have to ask Barry on this one, because I think maybe that's a little bit too much, like too much self-reflection. I don't think that I like to argue, but I think Barry would probably disagree with that statement and say that I very much do. I like to be right. I like to debate. I don't like to fight. So there's the difference. But had I filmed our game night with a bunch of lawyers in our house, I think we do like to argue because we were playing categories and it got heated. No bad blood, but there was a lot of argument over whether or not certain answers qualified as answers and should be awarded a point. So I think that we're all rather opinionated, but I wouldn't say that we're like jackasses that just pick fights for the sake of picking fights. But I do think that we enjoy like the verbal sparring and stuff like that. So I think that's a bit of a fair statement. This one's not so much about lawyers and more so about laws, and it says, laws give many loopholes and often ignore many people. I'm not sure in specific what area of law that person's referring to, but I will say that law is limited in terms of what it can do, and judges are limited by the law. So that's why most lawyers will try to keep their clients, especially in family law, out of court, because there's more creativity to be had in terms of crafting an agreement rather than allowing a judge who is a stranger to your family to make decisions for you and your children. I think one of the biggest areas of concern regarding the law is that it's not really set up to deal with mental health all that well. So when you have people who are coming to court who do suffer from mental health issues, they are at a bit of a disadvantage, and it's very difficult to deal with that kind of thing. And there are certainly areas of law that are a little bit antiquated, to be honest. So the law does evolve and it does change over time, but often it's changing out of reaction to things. So I would agree that it does ignore some people, and that it's certainly not a perfect system. That is for absolute sure. Next is that court is intimidating and all judges are scary to speak to. I guess that depends on the perspective, right? So court is going to be very intimidating to somebody who's never been there before. So my clients are often very intimidated and terrified to go before a judge. I used to be intimidated and terrified to go before judges, but I've been doing it so often that not so much anymore. Again, courtrooms aren't really what you see on TV. Ours, at any rate, are a lot smaller. There's no public galley in ours, so it's just the court staff, the litigants, and the lawyers if there are lawyers. So that kind of takes out some of the terror for my clients once I tell them that as well. And for the most part, judges, they're awesome. They're so much fun. When we have like continuing professional development courses and things like that, when we have social events, the judges are there and they're just people doing a job as well. And they have a different persona in court than they do when you see them in real life, but they're just people, and most of them, like they're just awesome. I really enjoy the judges that we have in our area here. All right, we've got two more. The next one is that I didn't want to deal with criminals, which is why I went into family law. I actually did want to do criminal prosecution when I went into law school. I think my family would have disowned me if I tried to do criminal defense, simply because I have so many police officers in my family, like 10, something like that. So I think that I would have been shunned from the family if I had worked to defend the people that they had put behind bars. But I don't know what it is. Like it was in law school where I volunteered at a family court and helping people do affidavits and presenting their like not presenting their cases, but helping them write down their story. And that's where the first seed was planted for family law, because it just seemed like such important work, because these people were so lost and just had no idea what they were doing, and they were so scared because it was their families. It wasn't just them, it was their children. and so many different aspects to it. There's the money side of it, there's the parenting side of it, there's just so many layers. So I think that's where the first spark ignited. And then as I got to actual practice, it just became a passion for me. So it wasn't that like family law was like a default or anything like that, or that it was a fallback to avoid other areas of law. I just really enjoyed it. Okay, the last assumption is that sometimes I have to represent quote unquote bad people. And I would agree with that. Now, I guess it depends on what your view of bad is, but certainly I have represented people whose morals do not align with my morals. Let's put it that way. All right, so the last assumption then is that sometimes I have to represent bad people. I'm not quite sure what the person's envisioning when they say bad people, but certainly I have had to represent people whose morals do not necessarily align with my own. I shouldn't say that I've had to, because I do have a choice in terms of which clients I take on, but sometimes I am not aware that my morals are not going to align until after I've been retained. And once I'm retained, it's a little bit more difficult for me to just be like, nah, I'm good, I want out. There has to be a really good reason for me to get off of the record for somebody. So sometimes I'm quote unquote stuck with them. And again, like, all you can do is the best that you can with what you've got. And my representing somebody who I don't necessarily agree with how they have treated their ex-spouse or treated their children, it's not necessarily a reflection on me. You get your clients as you find them, and you just do the best that you can. So yeah, I have had to do that. It's not always great. I mean, it's certainly not the highlight of my career, and it's not what I look forward to doing, but it does present its own unique set of challenges, and it's all part of it. I don't get to cherry pick, and I don't always know who is going to be an upstanding member of society and who is going to be a gigantic pain in the ass or have questionable ethics, right? So I just do the best that I can. That's what it comes down to. Anyways, guys, I know that this has been an incredibly long video, but thank you so much for sending in the assumptions. It was actually a lot of fun to read them and then obviously to respond to them as well. Again, thank you for being patient with me. I don't know why I didn't do it any earlier than this, but here we are, better late than never, right? So anyways, I hope you guys found that interesting and or entertaining, and thank you, like I said, for taking the time to watch. I will see you in my next video. Until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now.